All right. Good morning, Doug. Big news from Afghanistan over the last week. Definitely excited to hear your thoughts. Taliban takes over the whole place in a matter of days.
This is this is really rather funny. This is the most backward, nothing, nowhere place on the planet, more or less. And why should anybody care? Why should it affect us in any way? Well, it shouldn't, except for the stupidity of the leadership in Washington. I mean, the only regrets that I have about Afghanistan personally were that when I was going to school in Europe in the 60s, it was common, well, not common, but it was done to get on a truck for a cross Eurasia expedition run by Australians generally, taking, get on the truck in Paris or Geneva or someplace like that, and you ride the truck with a bunch of other guys, stopping in interesting places, all the way to Kathmandu,
Wow.
passing through Afghanistan. And I always regretted that I didn't do that.
That would have been amazing then.
It would have been amazing then, absolutely. And I could say something hands-on and meaningful about what's going on today, but I haven't been to Afghanistan. All I know is what everybody think they know. But this is just incredible to me, how stupid the people in Washington are. They've spent trillions of dollars in a tribal country. It's not a country anyway. It's an area of land run by tribal chiefs and emirs and God knows what else. And okay, so the Taliban, who obviously are supported by the average Afghan, have overthrown the puppet government that we set up.
Wait, so you say that they are supported by the average Afghan. What can you expand on that a little bit? Because I'm not sure that your average American believes that to be true.
Well, I don't know from being on the ground who the average Afghan, whoever he may be, actually does support. But backward, primitive countries are very deeply religious, and the Taliban are very deeply religious. And especially if you're a Muslim, the word of Allah is everything, and you don't need to know anything other than what Allah tells you. And this is what madrasas are all about. I mean, you spend your younger years doing nothing but studying the Quran. And the Taliban think that the most important thing in the world is the word of God. Well, if you believe in God, this is very logical. So
there didn't appear to be much resistance along the way, which implies that, there wasn't another opposing side with any kind of strong beliefs to oppose them. You know what I mean? That was something to fight for.
Of course not, because look at who are the people that have been in charge of Afghanistan since the Americans invaded the place. They've all been American puppets. And they've all been people that are basically collaborators, turncoats, and that have taken the side of the invader. They're quislings. So yeah, I mean, I'm no fan of the Taliban, absolutely not. But I can see it from their point of view that these people should be punished. And this is a culturally ultra-conservative society, and you can't change a culture in a matter of a decade or so, especially not trying to remake it in the American model. This is actually clinically insane that the Americans tried to do that. So I expect what's going to happen is that now that nobody can get out of Kabul now, here's what I've heard. Tell me if you have more updated facts, that there are so many panicked Afghans that they can't land or take off planes on the remaining runway they have because it's full of people and they can't get rid of them. So nobody leaves at this point, right?
That's right. Yes, that's it's the airport is effectively shut down at this point. I mean, that could change. I mean, you got the 82nd Airborne on their way there. And what funny things to me is that you have these.
How's the 82nd Airborne going to land? Are they going to parachute out?
I mean, it would be awful. I mean, it's such a terrible idea in my mind. But the thing is, I see these progressive, these woke folks that you would assume would be anti-war, but that are like, we got to get in there. We got to get in there to help these, because the women, they're going to be abused.
Oh, the women, of course. Right. Hey, listen, I think it's tough to be born in a Mohammedan society as a chick, but this is. It sounds very cold, but not my problem. These people have their culture. They've had it for thousands of years. It's their culture, their problem. If they even see it as a problem, maybe they don't.
Yeah. Yeah, some might, because they've grown up under the American imposed government there, so they may have different values, I guess, that they've adopted because of our presence. But what do you think about what do you think this says more broadly about the state of the America at this point, and like all of our, if we said 20 years trying to hold up this whole thing, and it literally collapses with under strong wind, or not even strong wind, but like under just a little blow from somebody, it just collapses. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, our planners, like who's that guy that's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who impresses me as completely worthless, and the Secretary of Defense, who's even more worthless.
Mm-hmm.
You think they, or the head of the CIA, you think they would have had some inkling that something might go wrong. And we didn't have months to get out. We had days to get out. And maybe we won't get out. I mean, maybe the Taliban will decide, you know what? Why don't we capture all these American soldiers? Which they can at this point.
Yep.
Now what do the Americans do?
Yep. I know. And I think one of the things that was the funniest or most amusing tweet about all of this that I saw over the weekend, was that the intelligence agencies revised their estimate of the time for the Taliban to take over Kabul from 90 days to 72 hours.
Yeah, and they do this like overnight. This shows the complete worthlessness of the CIA. They have never, ever predicted anything. Everything happens right under their nose. They've got thousands and thousands of people, reading books and snooping in other people's business. And they predicted absolutely nothing, from the rise of Fidel Castro to the nothing ever. Have they ever predicted? I'm unaware of anything that they ever have.
Yeah, I mean, it's hilarious to me that they. It's hilarious to me that they would even admit that, that we were planning on 90 days, but it's actually, we're revising it. We're closing the timeline a little bit, just to 72 hours, which means get the hell out now. And it ended up being like 24 hours. But what do you think that there's, a lot of people look at this as a partisan thing, and they're just like, well, it's because Biden, handled this all really poorly. And of course, he did, but it seems to me that it should be a repudiation of basically all the major institutions that have been, the expert class that has been making the decisions in Afghanistan for 20 years, and it should, everybody who's been at the Pentagon, every major general that's been, there's been 18 commanders in Afghanistan over this time period, all of them, from Bush to Obama. I mean, everybody, to Trump, all of them.
I have almost zero respect for most general officers in the US military, because once they arise to that level, it's mainly because they're good at backslapping and backstabbing. They're good at political operating, not necessarily military business. It's funny how generals have changed over the years. It used to be, when you got to be in your 50s or 60s, you got a little bit portly, fat. But now generals make it a matter of personal honor to be, as fit as a teenager. Well, that's good. I'm just saying they've like become narcissists, quite frankly. And we have entirely too many generals to start with. The only general I can think of that's worth a damn is the commandant of the Marine Corps. And this hasn't gotten much in the way of press, but this is a guy named, a 4-star named Berger. Have you seen what he said?
I saw it, but I couldn't confirm. I looked elsewhere and I couldn't confirm it. I couldn't find this information. But what did you?
How do you confirm these things, quite frankly, unless he comes out on public media? And then where did he say it? And how is this picked up in retail? I don't know. But basically, he's talking to the, I guess, the Secretary of Defense. And he calls him a weenie and a coward. And he calls Biden a phony president, and on and on. And what I really liked, and I think this was mostly about the vaccine, he said, if you try to vaccinate any of my Marines, you better come armed. Yeah. I mean, this is impressive, but it's also, if it's true, it's gross insubordination. I mean, I'm impressed with the guy, but the powers that be can't let him get away with that if that's what he said.
Yeah, they really can't. And I mean, this is the whole thing is we have no idea what's really going on in most places, and especially stuff like this that gets leaked. It's almost like, it's almost like the thing that gives people hope, like the whole Q phenomenon, or it's like just trust the plan. There's insiders in the military that are going to save the day in the end. That's what when I read it, I would go, boy, I hope this would be great if it's true, although it's not going to end well for that guy. But at the same time,
who knows? But on the other hand, I haven't seen any official denial from Berger saying, I don't know where this originated, but I didn't say it.
I agree. I couldn't find anything about it other than just this, I couldn't find any confirmation one way or the other, something that was just confirming it or whatever.
But, why don't we go back to why the US is in Afghanistan to start with? And it's supposedly because of what happened on 9/11 with the attack of buildings. But as far as we know, of course, we don't really know anything. They were, 15 or 16 Saudis that were responsible for that, not Afghans. And the Afghan government at the time said, we're happy to deliver Osama bin Laden to you if you'll simply present the usual extradition papers. I mean, what I recall is they were being very cooperative and playing the game the way it's supposed to be played when you have a possible criminal in your country. But that wasn't good enough for the US. The US wanted to invade. And then not only do they invade, but they stay for 20 years, breaking down doors in the middle of the night because the people are, believe in whatever the Taliban believes in. I mean, this is all insane. If I was an Afghan, I would be so pissed off at the Americans at this point. I mean, I'll bet a lot of the Afghans say, let's just kill them all. They've destroyed this country over the last 20 years. They've created an immense amount of hatred. They've tried to destroy our culture. I mean, it's not a very impressive culture from my point of view, but it's not my culture.
Yeah.
So, this is really a disaster.
Have you seen anything in your that is comparable with this in your life? Have you seen anything that is like such a unavoidable? I mean, it's a debacle, it's a disaster, it's a clusterfuck, and it seems, and you can't spin it or deny it. Like it's really, this one is just so in everyone's face. Everybody is like, this is messed up.
One of the things that I said in the newsletter, which I was writing in those days, 20 years ago, after they invaded, was this is going to end exactly the way it did in Vietnam, in Saigon, where in 1975, there are going to be people hanging onto the rungs of the helicopter, trying to get off the top of the embassy, the last helicopter out. And apparently that's exactly what's happening here. People are, tying themselves to,
The, yeah, to the cargo, to the U.S. Air Force cargo planes and falling off. It's
yeah, it's complete chaos,
yeah.
complete chaos.
Wow.
So this is just this is horrible. So this has gone a long way towards bankrupting the U.S. And it's really neat too. How many hundreds of helicopters and planes, tanks, APCs, Humvees, God knows what else in the way of materiel have just been gifted to the Taliban. It doesn't make much difference, of course, because they're not in a position to use them, don't know how, and maintenance, of course, they'll fall apart quickly. But well, maybe they'll sell them. I mean, to people who would like to use them.
Yeah, a couple of things that were really interesting to me that just to as facts, as you might say, is that when the Afghan army is essentially fleeing, not putting up a fight at all, and they're taking their vehicles, they're convoying into Iran with all their equipment. They escaped Taliban. Which is funny. I mean, I think that's funny, kind of interesting. And then the other thing was that the president of Afghanistan, him fleeing the country, like he was out pretty quick, and he was with carloads of cash. It says, in the yeah, but I bet you it wasn't Afghanis dollars or whatever the currency is. It was U.S. dollars. And where did they come from? They came from
U.S.,
us.
of course. Well, of course, it's well known that we ship pallets, like you find in a warehouse of $100 bills over there. Where's it all gone? It's just been wasted. This is one of my favorite movies. Is The Man Who Would Be King, starring Sean Connery and Michael Caine. Did you see that one?
No, I don't think I did. No,
it's a fantastic movie. It's the movieization of a Rudyard Kipling story about two British soldiers, a couple of sergeants, that are there in the 50s, 60s, I'm not sure. That's the era. And, use their savings to buy some rifles and some mules and go up to Afghanistan to conquer the country. And they do, the two of them do. And it works out really well for a while. It's a great story. But at the end, the local Afghans that they trained up to use the rifles that they brought and all this type of thing, they're just totally overwhelmed, by the mob. And that's pretty much the way this has ended. In fact, if I was an Afghan warlord at this point, I think I'd want to make a point. And the point I'd make is this. When the British came here, we killed almost every one of them. There was only one soldier that made it from their the main place where they were to another fort. I mean, there were thousands of British soldiers that got killed on the trip trying to make it to another group. One soldier, a doctor, made it. Okay. So that's an instructive lesson. And that's when the British left. And then, of course, the Russians left with their tail between their legs. So at this point, if the Afghans, I can see why they might want to go, hey, let's do a hat trick, 3 for 3, and really teach the Americans a lesson. Worse than Saigon in 1975.
Well, if you want to make sure they don't come back, that's probably the thing to do, right? I mean, I think like you want to discourage that. You want to make it costly on the front end, or else, you get enough troops there and they can reestablish themselves and, whatever. But one of the things I wonder about this whole thing is it seems like the sudden collapse reveals the fraud that had been going on for 20 years, the fraud that, we were making progress, that we were winning hearts and minds, that we were, that everything was okay. Like this was what we were told, right? I mean,
people believe this bullshit. It's unbelievable.
Right. And I think that like all frauds, they can collapse in the blink of an eye. And I wonder if this era, this 20-year period, if there are other frauds that are actually very similar to this one. For example, maybe, certainly our financial system seems like a giant fraud with all the money printing and everything goes on. And maybe the Fed is the Afghan army, you know. And then as soon as there's any kind of negative thing that everybody thinks, oh, the Fed's got my back or whatever, but when there's never any real challenge, maybe they'll fold like the Afghan army and, you know, just disappear overnight with as much loot as they can carry. I just think the tension, you know, it's like pulling back a rubber band, and like it doesn't take much for it to snap back in a really, really harsh way. You know, it just takes letting go. It doesn't take all the force it's taken to get it to that point. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. In fact, the whole US government resembles the US military in Afghanistan at this point. I think it's on the edge of collapse. I hope I'm wrong, because it's going to be so inconvenient when it does. And one sign of that is I understand that the government is putting out all kinds of things about we have to be afraid of an American Taliban, and we have to be afraid of domestic terrorism, and blah, 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 on and on. So it could be that these sociopaths are going to ramp up and revitalize the war on terror at the very time that they're trying to get everybody vaccinated. I mean, this is like lighting a match in a nitroglycerin factory at this point, that they would be stupid and bold enough to double down right
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. On Friday, then I think what you're referring to is the DHS issued this, you know, terrorist bulletin, and in it, you know, they say that this new terrorism advisory isn't based on any actual threats or plots, but says that there's a rise in anti-government rhetoric.
You expect, for God's sake.
I know you fuck enough shit up, but if people might complain. Yeah. But it really it's basically about the narrative. It says law enforcement have expressed concerns that the broader sharing of false narratives and conspiracy theories will gain traction in mainstream environments, resulting in individuals or small groups embracing violent tactics to achieve their desired objectives.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen, because I think most small groups of anti-government people know that half of their members are probably FBI plants or squealers, you know, so
Yep.
that you know, we live in a kinder and gentler police state at the moment. But no, that's not going to happen. But it is like a pressure cooker that's getting ready to blow this country. I think all we need is for the economy to start getting ugly, which is, let's see, what's going to set that off? It could be when they start making people, of all things, pay their rent again. There's something like 7.5 million people that are in forbearance, and forget about all the money they owe the landlords. The landlords will have to eat that, of course. But, you know, they've been getting their stimmy checks, skating on their rent money, I guess gambling on Robinhood. But if they don't start paying their rent again, well, how's that going to work? Because if you don't pay your rent again, I guess your landlord can kick you out once the forbearance goes away.
Yeah, they can kick you out if you didn't. Even if you start paying rent now, but you don't pay your back rent, they can kick you out.
Yeah, of course. So, and what new landlord is going to want to rent to you, knowing that you've skated on your last rent?
Exactly.
So, there's a good chance we're going to have lots and lots of people out on the street.
But the odds are that they're going to continue that. It just seems to me, and I know they can't, and this is the reason I say it, is because that's not the only program they extended. They extended the student loan repayment schedule. So that's been extended again, they say, for the final time, you know, through January. But they
those are never going to be repaid. Forget about that.
But they also increased, you know, that on Friday, they announced, the USDA announced an increase of food stamps by 25%.
Oh, well, it's about time, because food prices are up by 50%. I don't know.
Well, the funny thing is, though, is that they talk, you know, there's no inflation, that really, not really, but they have to increase these, but they do this. I was looking at this because I was curious when I heard this. I was like, well, first of all, how much is that in general? I have no idea how much that really is, costs the government or costs the taxpayers or whatever. But I'm curious. And also, I didn't know that uh, these administrative state could essentially approve vast increases in spending without congressional approval. I thought that actually Congress had to do that, but apparently not. And we're talking about, I don't know, like $25 billion extra is what it ends up being. I mean, or $20 billion
Well,
extra.
what does a food stamp recipient get? I understand that if you qualify for food stamps, it's like $225 per person per month, something like that.
It's actually on average, the average, and depends upon what area of the country you're in, but the average is now $157 per person per month. But there's 42 million people, like 1 in 8 Americans is on food stamps, 1 in 8.
It's quite a few.
So I just think they're going to, if they don't have to get Congress's approval to spend an extra $20 billion here, $20 billion there, they could just sort of announce it like this. I just wonder if, because I looked in the bill for, they referred to some executive order, in the press release, and they talked about the farm bill from 2018. And I'm like, there's nothing in there that says that I could find that says that they could just increase the price. They're supposed to publish, this new method for calculating the cost of food. But I don't know. It's very interesting. So anything's possible. And I don't think they're going to force people out of breath.
Aren't these numbers completely meaningless anyway? Because the US government's tax revenues, I mean, soon they won't even be able to cover the interest on the bill. And already that would not be the case if interest rates were not artificially suppressed to close to zero.
Right.
So they're just printing money up. It used to be to finance wars like that in Afghanistan and Iraq. They'd borrow the money from the nice Chinese. Well, they're not lending it. They're liquidating their treasuries. They're not that stupid.
Right.
So now we sell it to the Federal Reserve, which just prints up the money. We've got to be approaching the end game. But you know what Adam Smith said, there's a lot of ruin in our country. So he said that, I think. I just read this the other day, the reference for this. It said, he said this when the British lost the American colonies. And to a lot of Brits, like, oh, things are falling apart. But actually, after they lost the American colonies in 1783 or whatever it was, the British Empire, that's when it really went into its greatest expansion throughout the
Victorian era. Yes.
It's hard you can't be sure of these things. Here's another interesting thing. It's that the British illegalized slavery in all of their colonies, et cetera, et cetera. I think in 1833, and the way they did it is they bought the freedom of the slaves from their owners. And it was an immense cost. I mean, trillions in today's dollars. And in those days, it was it 2 million pounds, but each pound was actually, a pound was a gold sovereign, which we still have today, which is 0.23 ounces of gold. So it's a lot of money. It was real money. They had to come up with actual gold sovereigns to do that. So.
Right. Yeah. So I guess what I'm, you're talking about what might cause that financial unwinding. If the financial system today is a fraud in the same way that Afghanistan was a fraud, just sort of held up by a set of beliefs and press releases, and of course military people there just keeping things essentially on lockdown. If our financial system is like that, you talked about, the rent forbearance, or that might be what it is. Is there anything else, like any other catalyst that you can think of from a financial perspective that might cause that snapping back?
I think the stock and bond markets are two big ones. They're both in hyper bubbles at this point. And since everybody's invested in them, and just in the last year, 10 million new people have opened up Robinhood accounts alone. The stock market heads down, those people lose all their money, essentially.
and it's kind of a, if it starts to turn and the momentum around it turning, basically if people, because it is a faith-based thing at this point, it's not based upon any fundamentals, obviously. So it's like if people start to lose faith, then they start to run for the doors the way the Afghan army ran for Iran, right? I mean, then so investors, and that causes cascading down cycle of both of those markets.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that those could be the big ones. And that kind of hits home to not the people on the real bottom of society, but the people the next few levels up. I mean, and pension funds start going bankrupt too, many of which are, even today, with the markets at all-time highs, there's still many that are underfunded. So I don't see any way out of this, quite frankly. But I wish that we had quality reporting so we knew what was actually happening on the ground in Afghanistan. And I wish we could get into the heads of the Afghan Taliban leaders at this point, because now they know they have thousands of American troops trapped in Kabul, I guess. Can't get out, can't effectively land planes. And if they do land planes, what if they decide that they're going to shoot the planes down? They can use RPGs. They can just overwhelm the airport. I mean, this is a disaster, a potential disaster. The US Army is completely at the mercy of shoeless warriors.
Yeah, it's another interesting tweet I saw over the weekend was like I don't understand why it was some blue check mark authority on Twitter, but they said something like, I don't understand what the Taliban leadership are thinking right now with like continuing to advance into Kabul, because they have leverage. They should be negotiating with the government to be, or with the US essentially, and the international bodies or whatever, to be recognized, officially recognized. And I'm like, you clearly have never been in the military, do not understand the tactical advantages of moving fast and getting inside, somebody's strategic planning. Like you get on the inside of it. And that's why I think Biden hasn't been around for the last couple of days. It's actually because the situation is changing so fast that if he says something, he's going to look like a fool in 5 minutes. And he's got to wait until it calms a bit before he speaks, or else he'll look even dumber.
And they're going to be, the Taliban's going to be in a much better negotiating posture if they can actually capture the American army, as opposed to just intimidate them.
Right. That'd be shocking if that happens. That would be.
Well, this would be, I don't know. I'm trying to think. So the Taliban is thinking, that's a good play. Then we can ransom them from the Americans for a gigantic amount of money. And what are the Americans going to do? Two things: they can pay the ransom, or they can reinvade and try to kill every last Taliban. But you can't do that at this point. It would amount to a genocide. Actually, is what it would amount to.
Right.
So,
one of the big problems I talk about when I talk to soldiers who came back from Afghanistan, it's like you just don't even know who's Taliban. Like you have no idea. So that's
you don't. This is why foreigners should not invade other people's countries. It just never ends well. I mean, in ancient times, it could end well for a while because you invade the country and you could steal the artwork and the gold and the cattle and the women and enslave the place. And it was a very profitable enterprise for a while. But then you had to run the place and it started costing you money. And, so it's great for a while and then it acts to destroy you in the end. So, but today, in today's world, there's no upside to it at all, except for, the kind of people that hang around inside the Beltway that want to be big shots.
Well, I mean, there's certainly, that's why I think the whole thing that's why I call it a fraud, because it's like they perpetuated it, talked about it as though we were making progress, et cetera, and that it was a good thing. But meanwhile, you get all kinds of promotions that these generals get by serving there, the contracts that come out of it that insiders benefit from, and that people can, it's such a profiteering thing, for so many participants that they just keep it going that entire time. I mean, it's a sham and a fraud.
It is so criminal and so antithetical to the actual idea of America that, God, this is dangerous for me to say. We ought to have our own domestic Nuremberg trials for these people. But unfortunately, if we get Nuremberg trials, it's going to be the good guys, in our opinion, that are going to be tried. I mean, as the Bolsheviks, try to fabricate all this as an excuse to lock down the country.
I agree, and I think so. Just wrapping up, one major question for you is: what do you think of the people who today, the woke left people, the progressives, who feel like we need to do something now because of the plight of the Afghan people, that we really need to send some troops in now? Like, what's your response to that?
Yeah, well, of course, the argument is, hey, you broke it, you bought it. Well, you know what I would do it at this point? I'd say, I'm sorry, I apologize profusely, but we're leaving and we don't want to hear from you again, ever. Bye.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I just, there's something about the armchair, like, politician or whatever, basically, or their armchair general, or like where everything is just an academic question. They have their own weird value system. They go, no, this is good, so we should act. This is bad, we should act. And then and there's no cost to them in any of these decisions. Like, they aren't sending their children to fight. No, we don't even have to pay for it. It's like, it's all inflated money. It's not real. No one's paying for it.
If we did have trials, and like I said, the concept itself is very dangerous because the bad guys aren't going to be the ones going on trial. I would love to see people like Bush and Cheney and Wolfowitz and hundreds of others, all of their assets are confiscated and sold in order to pay for the costs of what they did. That might be a warning.
Yeah.
There'll be some justice involved in that. I mean, they broke it. They had no right to break it. So just because they were high government officials having a good time doesn't mean that they get to skate.
Right.
That's a thought.
It's a nice fantasy anyway.
It's a fantasy. Yeah.
It would be great. It would be great. All right. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 24 hours with this, because this is still a fast moving situation. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting. And I think that, like, one of the things I love about it, you shouldn't say, I mean, obviously it's a tragedy, travesty, it's a shame, all those bad things, of course, but it's the exposure of fraud always delights me. There's some delight I get when it becomes clear to everybody that something that they've been lied to, and that they participated in a lie, and that they've encouraged the lie, and all that, for years. So there's some maybe Schadenfreude in a way. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it. But
the establishment and the deep state have such total control of the means of communication that they're going to spin it in a way that it's not their fault. And this is the problem. This is one of the biggest things in the last decade or two that's happening now. And we can't really trust any news that comes out of there.
It's true. It's what's been good about Twitter, is that actually, especially before they figure out how to filter, what to filter, you do get a lot of news, a lot of information at first that I think is really interesting. It's not coming from NBC or Fox or CNN or people like that. So you see more like what the Taliban is filming, essentially. Which, by the way, the leader of the Taliban has a Twitter account, but Trump doesn't, which I find amazing. But that's so true.
That's funny. Do you know of any news channel that perhaps Al Jazeera?
I did watch some Al Jazeera over the weekend. They had some pretty. They were doing some good reporting. They usually do, and especially in the moment when things are happening, you can, they're usually pretty good about that.
And perhaps RT. What do you think?
I didn't see any RT that had like on the ground reporting, or had footage like they had, but there probably was some. Yeah. So there are places where people can find it, but I think anyway, it'll be interesting to see. And Biden is coming out of hiding today because I think he feels like the situation must be stable enough or something. But the funny thing is, that all these people cheering for saying he should resign, he should resign. It's like because
What's that gonna
Kamala
help
better.
anyway?
I know.
Then we get Kamala, who's got even worse ideas, and on top of that has more energy than he does. So, my God.
Yeah, if it's about resignations, I think that there wouldn't be anyone left to run the government, which would be a good thing. So it'd be top to bottom, essentially. But in any case, well, I appreciate it, Doug. We'll see tomorrow where we're at with all this. It'll be interesting.
I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Sorry.